This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cold Harbor Emergency Relay Network, Tillamook County Perimeter, the Perimeter Broadcast. If you are hearing this transmission, emergency conditions are ongoing. Every internet-connected device on the Oregon coast stopped receiving data at 9:11 p.m. Pacific. Landlines and AM radio are still functioning. Cellular voice is intermittent. The outage is not being described as an outage anymore. Two independent regional carriers have now stopped using the word restoration. By the time this broadcast ends, the advisory language will have changed at least 3 times. Do not turn off your radio. Do not attempt to reconnect your equipment. I can see, from where the desk is set up, the porch light of a house across the county road. That porch light is still on. The router light in the front window, the small blue one that would normally be visible from the road at this hour, is not. That is the concrete detail I can offer you at the top of this broadcast. The lights that plug into the wall are working. The lights that talk to something else are not. A regional emergency management office is calling this a wide area connectivity interruption. That is the phrase we were given at 9:19 p.m. Pacific. The desk is treating it more seriously than that phrase suggests, because the reports we are receiving from outside the county do not describe an interruption. They describe a stop. It is now 9:24 p.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 AM. I want to walk through what we know carefully and then what we do not. At 9:11 p.m. Pacific, according to a coastal coordination desk operating out of county facility, we are not naming on air. Every device on the Tillamook County backbone stopped receiving inbound data traffic. Outbound requests continue to send for a period estimated at between 40 and 90 seconds. Those outbound requests did not receive replies. After that window, outbound also stopped. That is the technical picture as it was relayed to this station. I want to be careful with that wording, because the phrase "stop receiving" is doing a great deal of work in that sentence. The coordination desk did not say the signal was weak. The coordination desk said the signal was absent. Those are not the same thing. A regional weather service bulletin for the Oregon coast came through on our teletype line, which is a dedicated wire, at 9:16 p.m. The bulletin was ordinary, fog advisory, marine layer, standard overnight conditions. The marine layer has come in as forecast. Visibility along 101 is limited to the near shoulder. That is the last piece of routine information the desk received before the tempo of this broadcast changed. I am passing that along as received. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cold Harbor Emergency Relay Network, and we are continuing to relay verified information. It is now 9:29 p.m. Pacific. A verified institutional report has come in from a regional hospital serving the North Oregon coast. The hospital's electronic medical record system, which is cloud-hosted, went unreachable at 9:11 p.m. That timestamp matches. The hospital has moved to paper intake. That is a procedure they drill for, and they are executing it. There is no reported impact to patient care at this time. I want to be precise about what that means. It means no impact has been reported in the 20 minutes since the outage began. It does not mean the situation is stable. The hospital's internal network, the one that runs inside their walls without touching the outside, is also not reachable. That is a detail the desk flagged. The internal network does not require the internet to function. It was designed not to. It is nevertheless unreachable. A separate verified report from a regional utility indicates that the electrical grid is holding. Power generation, transmission, and residential delivery are all nominal. The utility's own monitoring dashboard, however, which is web-based, cannot be reached by its own operators. The operators are working from local instrumentation. That is a manual workaround. The utility has advised its overnight crews to remain on site until further notice. That advisory was issued at 9:22 p.m. I am told there's a coordination call scheduled between coastal county emergency managers at the top of the hour. This desk expects to receive a briefing summary from that call. We will relay what we can when we can. A caller from the Harbor District at Garibaldi reports that the marine electronics aboard several dock vessels have gone dark. Not the running lights, not the batteries. The screens, the chart plotters, the AIS receivers the weather displays. This is unverified, and we cannot independently confirm the state of any specific vessel from the desk. But the same account is repeating. A second caller from the same harbor, roughly 9 minutes later, describes the same thing without prompting. That removes one easy explanation. It is not one boat. It is the boats. It is now 9:38 p.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 a.m. I need to correct one earlier framing. I referred to this event at the top of the broadcast as an outage. The Regional Emergency Management Office has now revised its language. In the bulletin timestamped 9:34 p.m., they are calling it a sustained non-response condition. I want to be careful with that wording. An outage is something that has gone off and can be turned back on. A non-response condition describes a system that is being addressed and is not answering. That is a different thing. That is the first time I have heard official language move in that direction, and I am flagging it for you now, 27 minutes into this event, because it is worth flagging. A verified report from a regional telecommunications carrier serving the Oregon coast indicates that their fiber backbone is physically intact. Their diagnostic equipment reports full continuity along every monitored segment between here and Portland. Light is passing through the cable. Data is not. I want to say that again because it is the strangest single sentence I have read tonight. Light is passing through the cable. Data is not. The carrier's engineers, according to the report, are running the diagnostic a second time. They expect a result within the hour. The desk will return to that thread. A caller from a residential neighborhood inland of Highway 101 reports that every smart device in the home has gone unresponsive at once. Thermostat, doorbell camera, 2 speakers, a refrigerator display. The caller checked the household router. The router's power light is on. The router's internet light is off. The caller reset the router. The internet light did not return. This is a common household experience on any given evening. What is not common is that the caller then walked outside and asked 3 neighbors. All 3 neighbors described the same state. Power light on, internet light off, reset, no return. This is not yet confirmed as a wider pattern beyond that street. It is being flagged. It matches the harbor pattern. It matches the hospital pattern. It matches the utility pattern. It is 9:38 p.m. Pacific, and the desk has now heard the same shape of report 4 times in 27 minutes from 4 unrelated sectors, all time-stamped inside the same 60-second window at 9:11. It is now 9:44 p.m. Pacific. A verified institutional report from a regional transportation authority indicates that the digital signage on Highway 101, both the fixed overhead boards and the portable message trailers, has gone blank. The signs are powered. The message queue is empty. The Transportation Authority is dispatching crews to place physical signage at key junctions. That is a manual workaround. I am told the crews were dispatched at 9:41 p.m. The desk has not yet received confirmation that the crews have reached their assigned locations. A separate verified report from a regional aviation coordination desk indicates that small craft flight following services along the coast are being handled by voice radio only. The digital flight data exchange between towers and regional centers is not passing. Voice radio is functioning. The aviation desk described the situation as manageable in current traffic conditions. That phrase is doing work. Current traffic conditions at this hour on this coast on a fog night are light. The phrase should not be read to mean the situation is manageable in general. It should be read to mean the situation is manageable right now because there is very little to manage. I want to be careful with that distinction. A caller from a farmhouse on the county line reports that their satellite internet dish, which has functioned reliably for 6 years, is showing a solid red status light. The caller states that they have never seen that particular red light in 6 years of ownership. The caller looked up the red light in the paper manual that came with the equipment. The manual lists the meaning of the red light as no signal from satellite. The caller stepped outside. The sky above the farmhouse is clear cloud cover in that direction. The dish is aimed correctly. The satellite is not answering. I am passing that along as received. The desk cannot independently verify the state of any satellite. What the desk can verify is that this is now the 5th sector in which the same shape of report has appeared. Ground fiber, cellular data, marine electronics, household routers, satellite. That is not one system failing. That is every system that speaks to another system failing to be answered. It is now 9:49 p.m. Pacific. A verified institutional report has come in from a regional water utility serving the North Oregon coast. The utility supervisory control and data acquisition system, which monitors reservoir levels, pump station status, and treatment plant chemistry across a service area of approximately 40,000 connections, went unreachable at 9:11 p.m. That timestamp matches. The utility's control room, according to the report, is presently unable to observe the state of any of its remote assets. Water is still moving. Pressure in the mains is nominal. The reservoirs are drawing down at expected overnight rates. What the utility cannot see is any of that from the control room. Its operators are relying on a phone tree to individual pump stations, staffed by field crews who have been recalled from their off-duty rotations. The utility's chief operator states, on the wire, that the treatment plant at the north end of the service area is running under standing chemistry orders from earlier in the day. The plant is not, at this hour, receiving updated targets. The chief operator states that standing orders are safe for a window of approximately 8 to 12 hours before the plant chemistry would need to be reevaluated. That is not an immediate concern. It is a concern the utility is naming out loud at 9:47 p.m. in a wire that this desk received 2 minutes ago, because the utility wants on the record. The utility adds a second detail, which the desk is flagging. Within the last 20 minutes, the utility's control room workstations have, on 3 separate occasions, briefly displayed data that the operators had not requested, data that appeared to be readings from remote pump stations. The readings, according to utility, were plausible. They fell within the range one would expect from the assets in question. The workstations should not be displaying anything at all. The workstations are not receiving from the network. The operators have been instructed to disregard any information appearing on their screens and to rely exclusively on the phone tree. That instruction was issued at 9:46 p.m. I am passing that along as received. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cold Harbor Emergency Relay Network. It is now 9:54 p.m. Pacific. The desk has, in the last 4 minutes, received a cluster of 6 calls from residences and small businesses across the county perimeter. I am going to relay these together because the shape is consistent. The first caller, from a house on a ridge above Bay City, reports that the household's cordless landline handset, which uses a base station plugged into the wall, produced a burst of what the caller describes as static followed by a click and then returned to normal dial tone. The second caller, from a home in Cape Mears, describes the same sequence at approximately the same minute. Static, click, normal. The third caller, from a bed and breakfast in Oceanside, describes an identical sequence on a different landline manufacturer. The fourth caller, from a residence on the road to Nettitz, reports the same. The fifth caller, from a farmhouse east of Tillamook proper, reports the same and adds that the household's baby monitor, which is a closed-loop analog device on a specific frequency, produced a corresponding burst of static at the same moment. The sixth caller, from a small business on the Harbor Road at Garibaldi, reports that the store's older paging speaker, used to call staff from the back room, produced a click, not static, a click. The store was closed. No one had used the speaker in 3 hours. I am passing these along as a cluster because 6 independent callers, in a window of roughly 4 minutes, describing the same audible artifact on 6 unrelated pieces of equipment, is not a set of coincidences a desk is prepared to characterize as coincidence. It is a pattern. It is unverified in the sense that the desk has not independently listened to any of the equipment in question. It is verified in the sense that the pattern has crossed 6 thresholds of household and small commercial audio hardware in the same window. This is KQWL 1620 AM. The desk is noting the cluster and returning to institutional reporting. The Regional Emergency Management Office has scheduled a public advisory for 10 p.m. Pacific. The desk will carry that advisory in full. Until then, we are continuing to relay verified information. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Coal Harbor Emergency Relay Network. Remain by your radio. The next update will follow shortly. It is now 10 p.m. Pacific. The Regional Emergency Management Office has moved its public advisory forward by 7 minutes. The desk received the text of that advisory on the teletype line at 9:58 p.m. I will read the substance of it in my own words as instructed by the office. The advisory asks residents of the Tillamook County perimeter to refrain from resetting or power cycling networking equipment in the home. That is the first restrictive advisory of the evening. It is being framed as a precaution to preserve diagnostic state for carrier engineers. The desk notes, for the record, that in a normal outage the standard advice is precisely the opposite. In a normal outage, residents are asked to reset their equipment. Tonight, they are being asked not to. I am not going to speculate about the reason for that inversion. I am flagging it. A verified report from a university lab on the Oregon coast, which the desk has previously used as a reliable source of technical framing, describes the current condition as, and I am paraphrasing, a global failure of a naming system that allows one machine to find another. The lab is careful to say that the physical layer, the cables and the radios, appears intact. What has failed is the layer above that, the layer that translates a request into an address and delivers it. The lab uses the phrase, no known cause. I want to be careful with that wording. No known cause is not the same as no cause. It is the same as the cause is not one they recognize. That is the framing they gave the desk at 9:47 p.m. A caller from a small business on Highway 101 reports that their point-of-sale system, which processes card payments through a cellular data connection, has been offline since 9:11 p.m. The caller has switched to cash only. 3 customers, over the course of the past 40 minutes, have been unable to complete purchases because they do not carry cash. The caller notes, without being asked, that none of those 3 customers seem surprised. The caller states that all 3 simply nodded and left. I am passing that observational detail along because the desk found it worth passing along. Something in the public temperature has already begun to adjust at 10 on a Tuesday night in a small coastal town, 40 minutes into an event that does not yet have a name. It is 10 p.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 a.m., Cole Harbor Emergency Relay Network. We are continuing to relay verified information. Stand by for the next update. It is now 10:06 p.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 a.m. For anyone joining this broadcast in the last few minutes, the desk will restate what has been confirmed. At 9:11 p.m. Pacific tonight, every device on the Oregon coast that relies on the internet to function stopped receiving replies. Landlines are working. AM radio is working. The electrical grid is holding. Voice cellular is intermittent. Data cellular is not. The Regional Emergency Management Office is calling the condition a sustained non-response condition. A regional telecommunications carrier reports that the physical fiber is intact and passing light. A university lab describes the failure as global and located in the layer of the network that translates a request into a destination. That is the picture as of just after 10. The one new detail I will add to that recap is this. The desk has not, in the last 55 minutes, received a single inbound wire report indicating that any location, anywhere, is unaffected. Not one report of a working data connection has reached this station. I want to be careful about how that sounds. Absence of a report is not the same as absence of a thing. It is possible that connections are working somewhere and no one has thought to tell us. It is also possible that they are not. The desk is noting the silence and moving on. A verified institutional report has come in from a regional rail operator. Their dispatch system, which coordinates train movements through automated block signaling, has reverted to manual authority. That is a documented backup procedure. Trains are being held at sidings and released one at a time by voice radio from human dispatchers. The rail operator states that this procedure is safe but slow. They estimate their throughput at approximately 1/5 of normal capacity. The rail operator adds, at the bottom of the wire, that they are not certain how long they can staff this level of manual authority overnight. That is a personnel concern, not an equipment concern, but the desk is noting it. It is 10:06 p.m. Pacific. It is now 10:13 p.m. Pacific. The desk has received a delayed public advisory from the Regional Emergency Management Office. It came across the teletype line at 10:10 p.m. I will summarize the substance of it in my own words. Residents of the Tillamook County perimeter, and as of this advisory, residents of adjoining coastal counties, are being asked to remain in their homes for the remainder of the evening. This is not a shelter order. It is a request. The office is careful with that distinction, and I am being careful with it as I pass it along. The office cites as its reason the reduced capacity of emergency services to coordinate over normal channels, and the risk of accidents on roadways where digital signage is offline and where traffic signal timing at several intersections has reverted to a fixed pattern. That is the second restrictive advisory of the evening. I want to note, for the record, that the language of this advisory does not describe a threat. It describes a reduced capacity to respond to threats. That is a different thing. That is worth naming out loud. A separate verified report from a regional aviation coordination desk indicates that all non-emergency small craft flights along the coast have been asked to land at their nearest available field. This is described as a voluntary compliance request. The aviation desk states that as of 10:11 p.m., compliance is at approximately 90%. Some aircraft are still airborne and are being handled by voice radio. The desk does not expect to receive an updated figure for another 15 minutes. A caller from a residential neighborhood near the county fairgrounds reports that the streetlights on their block, which are on a modern network control system, have gone out. Not all of them. Every third one. The pattern is regular. The caller counted. Every third pole is dark. The caller stepped into the street to verify this. The two lit lamps on either side of the dark lamp are, in the caller's description, brighter than usual. This is unverified, and it is the kind of report the desk would normally not put on air, because human perception of brightness is unreliable in unusual conditions. I am putting it on air because two other callers from two other neighborhoods have described the same pattern in the last 12 minutes. Every third lamp. This is KQWL 1620 AM. That language is being flagged. The desk will return to it. It is now 10:19 p.m. Pacific. A verified institutional report has come in from a regional broadcast affiliate operating out of a facility south of Astoria. The affiliate runs a small news and community information operation on the FM band, and it maintains its own physical uplink for coordination with a partner network in Portland. The affiliate reports that at 9:11 p.m. its uplink to the Portland partner stopped receiving replies. That is consistent with everything the desk has heard tonight. What the affiliate is reporting and what the desk is passing along is a second observation. Beginning at approximately 9:47 p.m., the affiliate's automated program log system, which queues pre-recorded content between live segments, began skipping entries. Specifically, the log system is, according to the affiliate's engineer, marking segments as played that were not played and marking segments as pending that had already been played. The engineer has walked the physical playback deck. The deck is running its cues correctly. The log is not describing what the deck is doing. The log is describing something else. The affiliate has taken its program log system offline and reverted to a paper cue sheet. That is a manual workaround. The engineer on the wire notes that the program log system is not a network system in the sense the desk has been discussing. It is an internal database on a single machine, physically located in a rack in the affiliate's building, connected only to the playback deck and to a printer. It does not touch the internet. It has never touched the internet. The engineer states that the machine's clock is correct. The machine's power is stable. The machine's own log of its own log activity does not show the discrepancy. The discrepancy is present only when the log is compared against a physical record of what was actually broadcast. Something between the machine and the record has drifted. The affiliate reports one further detail. The engineer, in the process of investigating, listened back to a recorded segment of the affiliate's 9 p.m. hourly news read. The segment was intact. The engineer describes the recording as, quote from the wire, one syllable longer than the read. The engineer cannot identify the syllable. It is at the end. It is quiet. It is not the reader's voice. The engineer is not on the wire, characterizing what it is. The affiliate is preserving the recording and has taken it out of rotation. I am passing that along as received. This is KQWL 1620 AM. It is now 10:26 p.m. Pacific. A verified institutional report from a regional hospital, the same hospital that transitioned to paper intake at 9:11 p.m., indicates that the hospital's diagnostic imaging equipment has begun exhibiting intermittent behavior. Specifically, machines that are designed to upload their scans to a central server for radiologist review are, instead of failing cleanly, completing the upload, and then reporting that no scan was ever performed. The scan exists locally on the machine. The scan does not exist on the server. The server has no record of the request. The hospital's technical staff described this as, and I am paraphrasing directly from the wire, a communication that succeeds and is then forgotten. That phrase is not the desk phrase. That phrase is the hospital's phrase. I am passing it along as received because I could not improve on it, and because I do not want to. A verified report from a regional utility indicates that at 10:21 p.m., 3 substations serving the North Coast briefly attempted to communicate with a load balancing system that has been unreachable since 9:11 p.m. The substations attempted the communication without human prompting. That is standard automated behavior. What is not standard is that, according to utility, the substation's logs record that the communication was answered. The logs record a successful handshake with the load balancing system. The load balancing system was, and remains, unreachable. Something answered on its behalf. The utility is not speculating about what. Their overnight crews have been instructed to bring the substations to fully manual control and to disregard the automated logs. That instruction was issued at 10:23 p.m. I want to be careful with the phrase, something answered. The desk is not naming a cause. The desk is noting that 2 independent institutional reports in the last 12 minutes have described communications that behave as if the missing system is still present. A scan that uploads to the server that is not there. A handshake with a load balancer that is not answering anyone else. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cold Harbor Emergency Relay Network, and we are continuing to relay verified information. Stand by. It is now 10:32 p.m. Pacific. A verified institutional report has come in from a regional emergency dispatch center that handles 911 traffic for 3 coastal counties, including this one. The dispatch center is one of the sectors this desk has been waiting to hear from, because 911 dispatch runs on infrastructure that is deliberately hardened against outages of the type the region is currently experiencing. The report was clear to the wire at 10:29 p.m. The dispatch center states that its own operations are continuing. Voice call intake from the public is functioning on landline and intermittently on cellular voice. Radio dispatch to responding units is functioning. The center's incident management software, which is a network application used to track calls and assignments across shifts, is not reachable. Dispatchers have moved to paper card intake, which is a documented backup procedure that the center drills quarterly. That is not the news. That is the expected posture. The news is this. Beginning at approximately 10:04 p.m., the dispatch center began receiving calls at a rate the shift supervisor describes as, quote from the wire, elevated but not surging. Callers are not, in the majority, reporting emergencies. Callers are reporting that they wish to confirm that the dispatch center is answering. The supervisor states that the volume of these confirmation calls is, at this hour, approximately 3 times the normal overnight call volume. The center is answering each one. The center is asking each caller whether there is an emergency to report. The majority of callers, according to the supervisor, state that there is not, and then remain on the line for a period the supervisor describes as longer than the conversation requires. The supervisor is not characterizing this pattern further. The supervisor is passing it along because the pattern is affecting the center's capacity to answer other calls promptly. The center adds at the bottom of the wire that in the last 30 minutes it has received 4 calls that connected, produced no audio at the caller's end, and disconnected after a period ranging from 12 to 19 seconds. The center is not able to trace the number of origin for any of these 4 calls. The trace system is a networked application. It is not reachable. I am passing that along as received. The center supervisor has asked that the desk relay a standing request to the public. The request is that residents of the affected counties refrain from calling 911 for the purpose of confirming that the line is answered. The line is answered. The center is operational. Please call 911 only for emergencies. That is a request. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cole Harbor Emergency Relay Network. It is now 10:39 p.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 AM. A caller from a house on the ridge above Nettitz Bay reports that their home assistant device, a small speaker that responds to voice commands, spoke without being addressed at 10:35 p.m. The caller states that no one in the household had said the wake word. The caller states that the device, unprompted, delivered what the caller describes as a weather report. The weather report was accurate for the current conditions on the ridge. The device has not been able to reach the internet since 9:11 p.m. It has no way to receive a current weather report. The caller unplugged the device. The caller called the station from a landline. This is unverified. I want to say that clearly. This is one call. The desk cannot confirm what the device said or whether it said anything at all. What the desk can confirm is that we have received 2 other calls in the last 19 minutes describing home devices producing speech or sound without being addressed. One of those callers described a smart television turning itself on to a channel that does not exist on that television's channel guide. The other described a printer producing a single page of output. The caller could not read what was on the page because there was, in the caller's words, no ink pattern that resolved into letters. It was, the caller said, a texture. The desk is noting these reports and not amplifying them. We will return to this thread only if institutional verification arrives. The Regional Emergency Management Office has updated its language on the wire. As of the 10:37 p.m. update, the office is no longer using the phrase sustained non-response condition. The office is now using the phrase unresolved communications event. That is the second official reframing in the last hour. I want to be careful with what that shift implies. Non-response is a description of behavior. An event is a description of a thing that is happening. The office has moved from describing what the network is doing to describing that something is being done to the network. That is the first time I have heard official language move in that direction tonight. I am passing that along as received. This is KQWL 1620 AM. It is now 10:46 p.m. Pacific. A verified report has come in from a regional coordination desk that liaises with counterparts in Washington State and Northern California. As of 10:43 p.m., the entire United States West Coast is reporting the same condition. That is not a Tillamook County event. That is not an Oregon coast event. That is a coastline event from the Canadian border to the Mexican border, with matching timestamps at the 9:11 p.m. Pacific onset. The coordination desk states that inbound reports from inland states, from the Mountain West and Great Plains, are also matching. The onset time in those regions corresponds correctly to 9:11 p.m. Pacific, which is to say, the onset was not local. The onset was simultaneous across time zones. Every affected region went dark at the same second on the clock, not at the same hour of their local evening. In some places it was late. In some places it was earlier. In some places dinner was still on the table. That is a piece of information the desk received at 10:43 p.m. and is passing along at 10:46 p.m. I want to give the listener a moment to absorb what that means, and then I want to move on to the next verified report, because there are several waiting. A verified report from a regional aviation coordination desk indicates that transoceanic flights currently in the air over the Pacific are, according to voice radio contact, unable to reach their airline dispatch systems. They are being handed off between air traffic control regions by voice, which is a procedure that exists and is being executed. The desk relays that no aircraft is reported to be in distress. The desk also relays that the aviation coordination is unable at this time to confirm the status of transoceanic flights over the Atlantic or over the Indian Ocean, not because it has confirmed a problem, because it cannot reach anyone to ask. It is now 10:46 p.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cole Harbor Emergency Relay Network. The next update will follow shortly. It is now 10:52 p.m. Pacific. The desk needs to develop, at greater length, a thread that appeared briefly earlier in the broadcast. Beginning at approximately 10:31 p.m., callers from 3 separate households in the town of Tillamook reported that their over-the-air televisions had begun to display a still image on every available channel. In the last 20 minutes, that pattern has expanded. The desk has now received 19 calls from residences across the county And on the wire from partner stations along the coast, additional matching reports from Astoria, Seaside, Lincoln City, and Newport. The image, as described by callers who have observed it directly, is consistent across every account. I want to describe what has been described to the desk carefully, without embellishment. The image is a photograph, or something that resembles a photograph, of an interior room. The room contains a chair. The chair is upholstered. The chair is positioned at a slight angle, not facing the viewer directly, closer to 3/4. There is a lamp beside the chair. The lamp is switched off. There is a window behind the chair. The blinds on the window are partially drawn, described by multiple callers as approximately 2/3 closed. Light is coming through the gap in the blinds. The light is described by every caller as coming from an angle that would correspond to late afternoon, low and from the left. It is not late afternoon anywhere in the affected regions. It has not been late afternoon anywhere in the affected regions for several hours. The angle of the light does not change between accounts and does not change over time on any single television. Additional detail. A caller in Seaside describes a magazine on a small side table next to the chair. The magazine is closed. The caller cannot read the title. Two callers in the town of Tillamook independently describe the same magazine on the same table. A caller in Lincoln City describes the same. None of the callers recognize the room. None of the callers recognize the chair. None of them have ever been to a room that matches the image. To their knowledge, the image is unchanging. It has been present in the reports the desk has received on every channel of every affected television since approximately 10:31 p.m. It is now 10:52 p.m. The image has been static for 21 minutes. A verified institutional report from a regional broadcast affiliate, the same affiliate the desk cited at 10:19 p.m., confirms that the affiliate has received reports of the still image from its own listenership area and has, in the last 10 minutes, verified the image on 2 office televisions in the affiliate's own building. The affiliate's engineer has confirmed that the televisions in question are receiving over-the-air signal only. The image is present on the signal. The affiliate is not, on the wire, prepared to characterize the image further. The engineer notes only that the image is stable, that the image is identical on both televisions, and that the affiliate has, quote from the wire, no further statement. The desk has also received, in the last 4 minutes, 2 calls from commercial establishments describing similar imagery on non-television screens. The first is from a hotel on the Coast Road, whose lobby monitor, normally used to display weather and local event information, has, according to the caller, who is a night manager, displayed the same room since approximately 10:34 p.m. The second is from a bank branch on Highway 101, whose exterior ATM idle screen, according to a caller who observed it from the sidewalk, has been displaying the same image since a time the caller estimates as shortly after 10:30 p.m. Neither the hotel monitor nor the bank ATM is a television. Neither of them receives over-the-air broadcast. The hotel monitor is driven by a small dedicated computer in a closet. The bank ATM is driven by a controller inside the machine. The desk is not offering a framing for this. The desk is noting that the same image of the same room is present on at least 3 distinct classes of display. Over-the-air television, a lobby signage monitor, and a standalone ATM idle screen. This is KQWL 1620 AM. It is now 10:59 p.m. Pacific. The desk has received a briefing summary from the coordination call that occurred between Coastal County emergency managers at 10:30 p.m. The summary reached us on the teletype line at 10:56 p.m. I will convey the substance of it. The county managers, collectively, are moving their operations to what they call full manual posture for the remainder of the night, with a review scheduled for dawn. Full manual posture means that all coordination between counties will be conducted by voice radio and by physical courier. It means that no digital tools will be trusted for decisions about resource allocation, and that verification of any request will require a human voice on the other end of a known frequency. This is a documented posture. It exists in the plans of every coastal county for exactly this kind of contingency. What is notable is that the plans, as written, envision this posture being adopted for a period of hours in response to a regional event. The county managers are not, at this time, specifying expected duration. That omission is being flagged by the desk. It is the third restrictive advisory of the evening, and it is the first one that does not include a horizon. A verified report from a regional utility indicates that the automated logs that were at 10:21 p.m. recording successful handshakes with a load balancing system that is not answering anyone else have continued to record such handshakes at regular intervals throughout the last 35 minutes. The utility has now disabled the logging function on those substations. The utility states on the wire that it is disabling the logs because the logs are, quote from the wire, being written. That phrasing is the utilities. I want to be careful with it. Logs are always being written. That is what logs are. The utility means, I believe, that the logs are being written by something other than the process the utility expected to write them. The utility is not naming what. This is KQWL 1620 AM. That thread is remaining open. The desk will return to it. It is now 11:07 p.m. Pacific. A verified institutional report from a regional hospital, the same hospital we have referenced throughout this broadcast, indicates that at 11:04 p.m., the hospital's paging system, which is a dedicated internal radio network and which does not touch the internet, produced a page for a physician who is not on staff and has never been on staff. The page was overheard by 3 nurses on the floor. The paging system reports no record of the page having been sent. The hospital's technical staff are describing this as, and I am paraphrasing, an audible event without a corresponding electronic event. The hospital is not, at this time, prepared to characterize the event further. The hospital's operations are otherwise continuing under paper procedures. I am flagging this because the paging system is not on the internet. It has never been on the internet. Whatever is producing the pattern the desk has been tracking tonight has, in this one reported instance, reached into a system that has no relationship to the failed network. That is a shift. I want to be precise about that. That is the first time this evening the desk has received a report of the condition appearing in a system that was never part of the affected layer to begin with. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cole Harbor Emergency Relay Network. Stand by. It is now 11:14 p.m. Pacific. A caller from a small commercial building on Highway 101 reports that the intercom system in the building, which is a closed-loop wired system used for internal announcements, produced a soft hum at 11:10 p.m., followed by what the caller describes as a moment of speech. The caller states that the speech was not intelligible. It was, in the caller's words, the shape of a voice without the parts of a voice. The caller states that the intercom system has been used exactly twice this evening, both times by the building manager, and that the 11:10 p.m. event corresponded to no known use. This is one caller. This is unverified. I am putting it on air because the desk has, in the last 20 minutes, received 4 separate reports of speech or speech-like sound emerging from closed systems that should not produce such sound. A hospital pager, a home speaker, a car radio that a caller reports playing a song that does not exist on any station and did not resume when the caller changed channels. And now an intercom. I want to be careful about how I present this. The desk is not saying that any of these systems is being spoken through. The desk is saying that the reports are converging on the same shape, and that the shape is not one this desk has a name for. I am passing that along as received. It is 11:14 p.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 AM. It is now 11:22 p.m. Pacific. A verified report from a university lab indicates that in the last 40 minutes, the lab has attempted to communicate with peer institutions in Europe and in Asia by every non-internet channel available to them. This includes long-wave radio, satellite voice, and a category of communication the lab describes on a wire as legacy dedicated lines, which the desk understands to mean older physical connections that do not pass to the modern internet. The lab reports that voice contact was achieved with 3 institutions. All 3 institutions confirmed the condition. All 3 institutions also reported, without being prompted by the lab, that they were, at the moment of the call, receiving unsolicited communications from their own internal systems. The lab is describing this convergence as, quote from the wire, the same shape of anomaly reported by independent observers on 3 continents within a 2-hour window. That phrase is the lab's phrase. I am passing it along as received. The lab states that it has, as of this moment, exhausted the technical hypotheses it began the evening with. The lab is not, on the wire, offering a new hypothesis. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cole Harbor Emergency Relay Network. The desk is continuing to relay verified information. It is now 11:30 p.m. Pacific. The desk needs to report development that concerns the station directly. At 11:27 p.m., the on-duty engineer for KQWL 1620 AM notified the desk that the station's own broadcast carrier, the physical radio signal on which this voice is reaching your radio, has begun to exhibit an intermittent secondary tone. The tone is present at a level below the primary broadcast, but above the noise floor. The engineer describes the tone as steady, non-modulated, and at a low frequency. The engineer states that the tone is not being introduced by any equipment inside the station. The engineer has checked. The equipment inside the station is functioning correctly. The tone is arriving on the carrier from somewhere else. I want to be careful about what that sentence implies. A broadcast tower emits. It does not receive. There is no mechanism inside the station's transmitter by which an external signal should be present on the outbound carrier. There is no mechanism. The engineer is checking it a second time. The desk expects an updated report within the hour. I am flagging this to the listener now, at 11:30 p.m. Pacific, because if the tone is audible on your radio, it is not coming from your radio. It is coming from ours. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cole Harbor Emergency Relay Network. Stand by. It is now 11:38 p.m. Pacific. The engineer has returned to the desk with the results of the second check. The tone is present. The tone is not being introduced by any equipment in this building. The tone is riding on the KQWL 1620 AM broadcast carrier. The engineer is now polled by voice radio the on-duty engineers at 3 other AM stations on the northern Oregon coast. All 3 engineers report the same tone on their own carriers. The tone is not a property of the station. It is a property of the band. The engineer notes, and I am quoting the engineer directly for the first time in this broadcast because the phrasing is exact, that the tone did not arrive. The tone was noticed. Those are different things. The engineer is not stating when the tone began. The engineer is stating that the earliest confirmable observation of the tone in the station's logs is at 9:12 p.m. Pacific. That is 1 minute after the internet stopped receiving replies. I am passing that along as received. This desk does not have a further framing to offer. It is 11:38 p.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cole Harbor Emergency Relay Network, and we are continuing to relay verified information. The next update will follow shortly. It is now 11:46 p.m. Pacific. A verified report from a regional emergency management office indicates that, as of 11:44 p.m., the office is revising its public advisory language for the 3rd time this evening. The office is no longer using the phrase unresolved communications event. The office is now using the phrase ongoing communications condition. I want to be careful with what that shift implies. An event is a thing that is happening. A condition is a state of affairs. The office has moved from describing something that is occurring to describing something that is. That is the 3rd reframing in less than 3 hours, and it is the one that removes the word event from the language. That is a significant shift. It is the first time this evening the desk has heard the official framing acknowledge, in its own vocabulary, that this is no longer a thing being resolved. It is a thing being lived with. The advisory adds one new restriction. Residents are asked to refrain from attempting to establish new digital communication of any kind, including the use of previously disconnected equipment, until further guidance is issued. That is the 4th restrictive advisory of the evening. I am passing it along as received. This is KQWL 1620 AM. A caller from a farmhouse west of the county line reports that at 11:41 p.m., every light in the caller's home dimmed briefly, in unison, and then returned to normal. The caller states that the household is on the standard utility grid, that no appliance was switched on or off, and that the dimming was not accompanied by any other electrical symptom. The caller states, further, that the dimming corresponded, in the caller's estimation, with a change in the character of a low sound that the caller had begun to notice earlier in the evening. The caller describes this sound as difficult to locate and difficult to name. This is unverified. It is one caller. In the last 4 minutes, 2 other callers have described the same brief, Unison dimming at 11:41 p.m. in 2 other homes on 2 other roads. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cole Harbor Emergency Relay Network. The desk is noting the reports. It is now 11:55 p.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 AM. For listeners joining at the top of the hour, the desk will restate what has been confirmed. At 9:11 p.m. Pacific this evening, the internet stopped receiving replies worldwide at the same absolute moment. The physical infrastructure remains intact. The failure has not been resolved and, in the last 12 minutes, is no longer being described by the responsible offices as an event. It is being described as a condition. Institutional systems that never touch the internet are now reporting unsolicited outputs. A tone is present on the KQWL 1620 AM broadcast carrier, and on every AM carrier the station has been able to check, dating the logs to 1 minute after the onset. One new detail. As of 11:52 p.m., the on-duty engineer reports that the tone has, in the last several minutes, become more clearly audible to the ear. The engineer is not calling it louder. The engineer is calling it more clearly audible. The engineer notes different things. I am passing that along as received. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cole Harbor Emergency Relay Network. A verified report from a regional coordination desk indicates that, as of 11:50 p.m., voice radio contact with counterparts in the Pacific Northwest is being conducted on a rotating schedule of frequencies. The rotation is a documented practice for degraded communications environments. It exists in the standing plans. What is new tonight is the reason for the rotation. The desk is not, in this instance, rotating to avoid interference from external actors. The desk is rotating because on any single frequency, held for more than a few minutes, the low tone becomes audible in the background of the voice channel and interferes with the intelligibility of the conversation. The coordination desk describes this on the wire as, quote, an environmental effect on the radio spectrum. That phrase is doing work. An environmental effect describes weather. It describes a physical medium. The desk is not saying an actor is interfering. The desk is saying the medium itself has changed. I want to be careful about how that sounds. I am passing along as received. It is 11:55 p.m. Pacific. It is now 12:04 a.m. Pacific. We have crossed into the following day on the calendar. A verified institutional report from a regional aviation coordination desk indicates that, as of midnight, all non-emergency civilian air traffic in the affected regions has been asked to remain grounded until further notice. That is a global shift. It reached the desk on the wire at 12:01 a.m. The aviation coordination is describing this as a precaution in light of the degraded state of both digital and voice communications with airborne aircraft. The desk is passing this along without further framing. It is the 5th restrictive advisory of the evening, and the first that reaches beyond the perimeter of the Oregon coast into a global instruction. A verified report from a university lab indicates that at 11:58 p.m., the lab attempted to characterize the low tone on the AM band using its own equipment. I want to be careful with how I convey this. The lab reports that the tone is not, in its measurements, a single frequency. The lab reports that the tone appears to occupy a narrow range, that the range is stable, and that the range is not resolving into a specific value under repeated measurement. The lab does not offer further framing. The lab notes, at the bottom of the wire, that this is the first physical phenomenon in its measurement history that has failed to yield a specific value under the equipment in question. That is the lab's phrasing. I am passing it along as received. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cold Harbor Emergency Relay Network. A caller from a residence in the Harbor District reports that the household's AM radio, which is tuned to the station, has begun to produce, in the pauses between the desk sentences, what the caller describes as a second, quieter voice, saying nothing intelligible. The caller states that the second voice is not the desk. The caller states that the household has confirmed this observation with a neighbor listening to the same station on a separate radio in a separate room. This is unverified. It is one caller and one neighbor. The desk is putting this on air because we have, in the last 11 minutes, received 6 other callers describing the same phenomenon in 6 other households across the county. I want to be careful. The desk cannot hear what the callers are hearing. The desk has only its own voice going out. Whatever is in the pauses is not being introduced by the desk. This is KQWL 1620 AM. Stand by. It is now 12:13 AM Pacific. The desk has received a briefing summary from a coordination call that occurred between the Regional Emergency Management Office and its counterparts in the state capitol at midnight. The summary reached us on the teletype line at 12:10 AM. I will convey the substance of it carefully. The state-level coordination is, as of the top of the hour, formally moving to what it is calling a standing communications posture. Standing, in this context, is a specific word. It means a posture is not being adopted in response to an event that is expected to end. It is being adopted as the operating condition until further review. I want to say that again in plainer language because it matters. The state has stopped waiting for the internet to come back. The state has begun operating as if the internet is not coming back. That is not a statement about what will happen in the future. That is a statement about how the state will act starting now. The desk is not editorializing. This is what the wire says. A verified report from a regional utility indicates that, as of 12:08 AM, the utility has permanently reconfigured its overnight operations to run without reference to any of the automated systems that have been producing unsolicited log entries since 10:21 PM permanently. In this context, means until reversed by explicit written authorization. The utility notes that the reconfiguration is straightforward, that its crews are trained for it, and that the grid is holding. The utility does not, on the wire, address the question of what has been writing the logs. That thread is remaining open. I am flagging that this is now the third hour of that thread being open. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cold Harbor Emergency Relay Network. It is now 12:23 AM Pacific. A verified institutional report from the regional hospital indicates that since 11:04 PM, the paging system has produced 4 additional pages for physicians who are not on staff and have never been on staff. The hospital's technical staff have disabled the paging system. The disabled paging system, according to the report, produced a 5th page at 12:19 AM. The page was audible in the corridors outside the paging office. The paging system, according to the hospital's technical staff, is not receiving power. It is disabled. I want to be careful with what that sentence implies. The desk is passing it along as received. The hospital does not, on the wire, offer a further framing. The hospital states, at the bottom of the report, that patient care is continuing under paper procedures and that the hospital does not, at this hour, intend to comment further on the paging system. That is the hospital's decision, and the desk respects it. A caller from a residence near the county fairgrounds reports that the streetlights on the caller's block, which earlier this evening had gone dark in a pattern of every third lamp, are, as of 12:20 AM, all lit. The pattern has resolved. The caller states that the 2 lamps on either side of the previously dark lamps are no longer visibly brighter. The block, in the caller's description, looks ordinary. I want to be careful about how I present this. The desk is not describing this as an improvement. The desk is describing this as a change. Something adjusted the streetlights earlier this evening. Something has now adjusted them back. In neither case did any human being make that adjustment. This is KQWL 1620 AM. It is now 12:33 AM Pacific. The desk needs to report a development affecting this broadcast directly. At 12:29 AM, the on-duty engineer for KQWL 1620 AM notified the desk that the low tone on the station's carrier has entered a new phase. The tone is no longer merely present on the broadcast. The tone, in the engineer's measurement, has synchronized with the primary broadcast in a way that the engineer describes on paper as, quote, tracking. The tone rises and falls very slightly in a pattern that follows the shape of the voice on the air. It follows my voice. I want to be careful about what that means. It does not mean the tone is speaking. It means the tone is shaped at the margins by what this desk is transmitting. The engineer has verified this observation against the carriers of the 3 other AM stations previously polled. The same tracking behavior is present on their carriers, following the voices on their air. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cold Harbor Emergency Relay Network. The desk is passing this along as received. The desk is going to continue broadcasting. I want to note for the listener, that I am aware of what I have just said. The desk has considered it. The desk is going to continue. It is now 12:42 a.m. Pacific. The Regional Emergency Management Office has issued what the wire describes as its final advisory of the night. It reached the teletype at 12:39 a.m. I will convey in my own words, carefully, because the language is unusual. The office states that residents of the Tillamook County perimeter, and by extension of the affected regions, are asked to operate until further review under the assumption that digital communication is not available and will not become available on a schedule the office is prepared to project. The office states that this assumption should be treated as the operating condition rather than as a temporary inconvenience. The office adds, and this is a phrase I want to read carefully, that restoration is not, at this hour, an active planning concern. I want to be precise about what that phrase means. It does not mean restoration will not occur. It means the offices responsible for planning are not, tonight, spending planning time on the question of restoration. Their planning time is being spent on how to operate without it. That is the sixth restrictive advisory of the evening, and it is the one that closes the loop on the language shift that began at 9:34 p.m. This is KQWL 1620 a.m., Cold Harbor Emergency Relay Network. A verified report from a university lab indicates that, as of 12:37 a.m., the lab has, quote, no further technical statements to make tonight. The lab is standing down its overnight measurement effort and resuming at first light. The desk notes this as a point at which our most reliable technical source has, for the first time in 8 years of routine cooperation, declined to offer further characterization of an ongoing event. I am passing that along as received. It is now 12:52 a.m. Pacific. A caller from a farmhouse on the ridge west of the county line reports that at 12:48 a.m., the household's landline telephone, which has been the household's only functioning form of communication for the last 3 hours, produced a dial tone that the caller describes as, quote, wrong. The caller states that the dial tone is present, that it is at the correct pitch, and that it is not the dial tone the caller has been listening to for 40 years in that house. The caller cannot articulate the difference. The caller states, without prompting, that the caller does not intend to place any further calls from that telephone tonight. This is one caller. It is unverified. In the last 9 minutes, the desk has received 3 additional calls describing dial tones on landlines that the callers describe, without prompting from the desk, as somehow altered. None of the callers can articulate the alteration. All of them, unprompted, state that they will not place further calls tonight. I want to be careful with what that means. It may mean nothing. The desk is noting it. The desk is not, at this hour, in a position to say more. This is KQWL 1620 a.m. Stand by. It is now 1:01 a.m. Pacific. The desk has received the final coordination summary of the night from a regional emergency management office. It reached the teletype at 12:58 a.m. The summary is brief. I will convey it in full in my own words. As of 1 a.m. Pacific, the condition that began at 9:11 p.m. Pacific is described by the office as stable at full intensity. Stable, in the wire's language, means not changing. Full intensity means at the highest level so far observed. Together. Those 2 words mean that the office does not expect the condition to worsen and does not expect the condition to lift. It expects the condition to remain as it is. That is a working assumption under which every coordinated system in the affected regions will operate, beginning now, until reviewed. The office adds one final line, which the desk will read carefully. The office asks that residents of the affected regions understand that the absence of digital communication is, quote, the condition of the environment and not a failure to be corrected. That is the 7th and final restrictive framing of the evening. The desk is passing along as received. This is KQWL 1620 a.m., Cold Harbor Emergency Relay Network. It is now 1:09 a.m. Pacific. The on-duty engineer has returned to the desk with a final measurement for the night. The low tone on the KQWL 1620 a.m. broadcast carrier is, as of the last verified reading, stable. The tracking behavior against the voice on the air is stable. The presence of the tone on every AM carrier of the station has been able to check is stable. The engineer is not describing this as a problem to be repaired. The engineer is describing this as the current state of the band. The engineer notes, at the bottom of the paper handed to the desk, that the tone is not going to be removed by any action available to the station. I am passing that along as received. The station will remain on the air. This desk will remain at the desk. The broadcast will continue at reduced tempo until dawn, at which point it will resume routine hourly relay understanding conditions. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cole Harbor Emergency Relay Network. It is now 1:16 AM Pacific. There is not much more the desk can offer you tonight. The layer of the world in which one machine could find another is not returning on a schedule anyone has been able to name. The offices that are responsible for such projections have stopped making them. The engineers responsible for physical medium of this broadcast have observed that the medium itself has acquired a new resident, and they have stopped attempting to evict it. The lights in the houses along the county road are still on. The porch light across from this station is still on. The blue router light in the front window of that house is still off. That is the picture as we cross into the small hours of the morning. It is what we have. The desk is not telling you that this is the end of anything. The desk is telling you that a great many things that ended at 9:11 p.m. Pacific are, as of 1:16 a.m., not going to resume tonight, and are being formally treated as not resuming at all. Landline telephones are functioning. AM radio is functioning. Do not attempt to restore your equipment. Do not attempt to establish new digital communication of any kind. The desk will remain on air until dawn. The broadcast will continue at reduced tempo. The low tone will continue with it. This is not a temporary arrangement. This is a condition of the environment. Remain within the perimeter. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cole Harbor Emergency Relay Network.